Hello and welcome to the Climate Conscious Podcast. I am your host, Derval, and this is the Demystify series. Join us as we unravel pressing climate and sustainability challenges and innovative solutions. Today, we are demystifying the topic of global peace. On today's show, I'm joined by Jesse Ramcharan. Jesse Ramcharan is a transformational leader and business consultant specializing in digital transformation and change management with extensive experience in technology, finance, operations, and leadership. A dynamic advocate for sustainable development goals, Jesse is particularly focused on climate action and renewable energy. He is the Regional Director of USIDHR, U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights, the Country Director of Global Peace Chain, the Director of International Affairs at Global Care Heroes, and the Chief of Staff at World Trust. Jesse has also been a keynote speaker, guest speaker, panelist, and delegate at several international conferences for sustainability, peace, human rights, and climate change. He is also the author of The Catalyst Global Impact, a newsletter on LinkedIn. Above all, he's an advocate for change in Trinidad and Tobago. Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Derval. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, and thank you for having me featured on your podcast today.
So great to have you. On this podcast, we have explored several of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, including climate action, clean energy, gender equity, and life below water. And although distinct, we see that the goals are all connected. Now, one of the lesser known SDGs is Goal 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. So, Jesse, can you help us by defining SDG 16 and outlining for us how it connects and supports the other SDGs?
So, SDG number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, is something that's been thrown around in conferences across the world. Sometimes you hear it often or not, and sometimes we don't really understand what we're referring to. So, let's jump right into it. It's actually the foundation for creating inclusive, just, and sustainable societies. What it does is emphasizes the importance of fostering peace while promoting access to justice, reducing corruption, and building accountable yet transparent and effective institutions across and at all levels. Full stop. Strong institutions are the backbone of equitable governance, and peace is the prerequisite for sustainable development. Now, that's quite a mouthful, but I hope that it ties in summary what that goal SDG 16 is. So if I may go into the different SDGs relating to the question, SDG 16 directly supports the achievement of the other SDGs by addressing systemic challenges that hinder their progress. So what do I mean? Let's take, for instance, SDG number 1, no poverty. Without strong institutions, poverty alleviation efforts are undermined by corruption, inefficiency, and lack of access to fair resources. When institutions uphold the rule of law and ensure equitable resource distribution, they create an environment where individuals and communities can rise out of poverty sustainably. Looking at climate action, a familiar SDG goal here, SDG 13, if we're tackling climate change, that requires global cooperation. This is impossible without peace and robust institutions to enforce climate agreements, mitigate disputes, and support vulnerable populations. So we're talking about having peace, but we're also looking at it on a global level. That means we need to have a level of diplomacy. So justice systems that protect environmental laws and ensure accountability, they are vital for addressing climate crisis. If we look at SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. When you use the word cities in a global context, it's a bit distant to related in the local context because we refer to the cities as probably metropolis, and we don't tend to see our local setting in that way. But sustainable cities are in which what we're trying to achieve locally or live. But how do we go about doing this? Building resilient and inclusive cities for the places that we aspire to live and work out of, that one location. It requires institutions that facilitate effective urban planning, enforcing housing rights and maintaining public safety, which is above all the greatest concern, right? No crime. So without strong governance, urban areas are more likely to face issues like inequality, lack of basic services, and possibly environmental degradation. So if I should tie all of this in essence, SDG 16 is the glue that really holds sustainable development together. Peaceful societies and strong institutions provide the stability needed for long-term investments in, let's say, poverty eradication and climate resilience, but most of all, sustainable urbanization. So they ensure that no one, I believe, is or should be left behind, and that progress is both inclusive and enduring.
Thank you, Jesse, for a very comprehensive explanation of SDG Goal 16 and for highlighting the way that it intersects with the other SDGs and for showing us that our efforts at climate action, at eradicating poverty, at building resilient and sustainable cities, all of these efforts would be inadequate and ineffective if we do not have global peace, if we do not have just and inclusive societies, and if we fail to build accountable and transparent institutions.
Definitely agreed. Yeah. And that's something that the conversation needs to be open and brought about with fellow young persons so that we can start dissecting what each element is, what are the different goals of the SDGs, how do we as advocates get involved in each of the goals? Do we target one without the other? Are we looking at it on a broader spectrum of how they're interrelated and how your actions impact the other? All of these things need to be calculated, but also work hand in hand with each other. And that's why I would like to promote the collaboration amongst the goals. A fun spin-off from this is when I would have presented many years ago at one of the UN conferences for SDGs. I made it known that I think there's an additional goal, and that's a goal of friendship because how should I say it? We're spanning diverse eras, cultures, geography, and we're looking to collaborate with different spheres, developed societies, underdeveloped, developing, and we're seeing different economics and different geography and different socioeconomic and politics and all of these things we're laying up out each other. But that one thing that carries us through is the same goal of which all of us have in mind to achieve the SDGs goal. And I believe that there is another goal, which is the goal of friendship. So I think if we go on that merit, I think that we would be collectively achieving the goals together.
Now, Jesse, before we get more into the topic of global peace and SDG 16, I want to delve more into your personal and professional journey. As I mentioned in your introduction, you wear many hats. Tell us about Global Peace Chain and your role as country director.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to share that. So my journey actually started about 5 years ago, and it came to me in just one of those emails. And like you, like myself, our inbox is really filled with emails constantly. And I was going through this email and reading the content of it, and someone asking me for my to share my thoughts and views on global peace and what am I doing in the region of the Caribbean and how do I see myself impact and change as a young leader? And I wrote the response because, like I do, we will have networks, and I think this is where it started for me. And then sooner or later, the organization that was responsible for that survey, that questionnaire that came to me, reached out and said, "Okay, we are a global peace chain organization, and we're looking to start this chapter in Trinidad. There's no one here. Would you like to be considered for this role and responsibility?" And like every other organization, you have to submit your information, go through a whole panel screening, and all of that was done. And eventually got the responsibility to be the country director for Global Peace Chain, which is an international organization registered in the US, and started that chapter locally here in Trinidad. And since then, we've had numerous persons shuffle through, and I mean that because it's been 4 to 5 years now going. So over the course of those years, we would have different professionals come in, spend some time, whether it be a year, 2 years, shorter periods, go in and out, and each person, each delegate, each ambassador, as we call them, the ambassadors for peace, they have a different responsibility. And each person comes in with their own skill set. And what I try to do with our local chapter is have at least one person to each of the SDGs. And that is was a beautiful strategy that we had so that each of the goals could have had someone making a positive impact. But in its simplest form, the mandate of the local chapter is to localize the mission of global peace chain by implementing programs, initiatives that align with its core objectives, peace building, capacity development, advocacy for the SDGs, and specifically to the region that we're in, how can we bridge gaps in our sphere? So like educating and empowering youth through different programs and promoting social equity inclusion, aligning peace with sustainable development. We just spoke about that. SDG 1, 10, 13, 16, all the different numbers. So through the efforts, I work with a diverse team to build strategic partnerships, engage in policy advocacy, implementing the strong grassroots initiatives that amplify voices of those that are left unheard. So reaching into marginalized communities or societies that are unheard of and providing youths with different opportunities. And if together we strive to create that ripple effect of peace and development, one community at a time. But ultimately, what I'm most proud of is the creation of JAP, which is known as the Junior Ambassador Apprenticeship Program. This was designed for youths to bridge the gap between the professionals focus on nurturing and development the younger minds towards the SDGs, both in a local context and to give them that perspective for in a global sense for the bigger picture. And why JAP is so important is that we realize that in global peace chain, there is a certain age limit that the organization wanted youths to be involved. And what you find happening is that in our society in Trinidad, the younger persons themselves won't involve as heavily as that when compared to in a global context. So in my first 2, 3 years of the organization locally, I've gotten more professionals, mid-level professionals, 30s, 40s to come on board, so that would have been a little more than the over actually the age limit that the organization wanted. And to bridge the gap, it was in 2021 or 20 or probably previous to that, prior to that, may have been earlier than that. That in one of the conferences held in Istanbul, when I was there representing, I decided, okay, at this point, I need to bridge that gap and find a way forward. And on discussing with my team, we were able to quickly put together a proposal, a structure, a plan, and we came up and launched in Istanbul, in Turkey, that program called JAP, the Junior Ambassador Apprenticeship Program. And it was directly aimed at young persons from 18 to 25. And we launched the program and we held a successful cohort of young persons, and they came in and we had a 6 month apprenticeship program over the course of the year. And we focused on, harnessing them potential, their knowledge, developing their skill set towards the SDGs. What are the SDGs? What they wanted to do, how they see themselves, developing character, personality, but more so their advocacy in themselves, understanding what they like and what they want to pursue. And albeit they were either in university, either they were graduated, either they were young persons, they have all now blossomed into their own fields, and we have many of those actually in foreign universities now, as well as in policy, junior policy positions. So I want to just say, anybody listening, I give a lot of information about Global Peace Chain globally. You can find the information on globalpeacechain.org. But in Trinidad, if you want to connect, if you want to feel free to be a part of, reach out to me. Let's get that assessment done and see how you can be a part of the initiative and how best we can. And also, the organization has been working towards a local conference. So that's something in 2025 we're looking forward to. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share on what global peace change is, and I hope that anyone hearing would be interested to be a part of it, whether it be a young person to get involved or a fellow professional who would like to also get involved and be one of the persons to be involved in a job program as a mentor.
Yes, Jesse. Since I've known you for a number of years, your passion for the SDGs as an advocate and also as a sustainability professional is quite evident. So I must say that Global Peace Gene made an excellent choice in selecting you to lead the local chapter. So you mentioned impacting change as a young leader, and also you were instrumental in founding the JAP apprenticeship program in Trinidad. So that brings me to my next question. What is the role of youth in fostering peace and justice, and how can they be better engaged?
Okay, great. So I like how this question pivots, straight from me engaging young people in global peace chain and putting out that call to get involved. And I just want to echo the fact that youth play a pivotal role in fostering peace and justice, as they are not only the leaders of tomorrow, but they are also change makers of today. I see that, and let me stick a pin there. Coming back to me attending those conferences, and like you mentioned, you've known me. We've known each other for quite some time, maybe a decade or so, involved in different spheres. And one of the things is that locally, let's go back 10 years ago, I would have found that myself would have been a young person getting involved in those initiatives. Now, on the flip side of it, when I travel and get involved and we go to these conferences, I realize that I am not the youngest in the room anymore. There are a lot younger persons there. And I see this with awe, admiration, baffled sometimes, surprised even, at the fact that a 22-year-old can be a diplomat in a government. And I'm sitting here in my late 20s looking on. I'm like, you know, we need to do more for getting our youths involved locally. Yes, there's a certain level of respect that has to be gained and given towards professionals who are well seasoned or in their 30s, 40s, 50s. But if we keep just developing the professionals, the gap is going to be bigger from the youths who are going to mentor the youths to get them where they need to. On a global scale, the youths are the one driving the SDGs, the initiatives, the Paris Accord, all the different charters, even the UN human rights. So I believe that the role that the youth play in fostering peace is evident that we need to uh, get them more involved, invest into them, their energy, their creativity, their ability to challenge traditional norms, positions them to uniquely drive innovative solutions towards different social issues. So youth are more often at the forefront of grassroots movements as we see in day to day now, as they would advocate. And they also are the ones leveraging digital platforms to amplify their voices, advocates for change, even in communities around critical issues, as I said, for human rights, social justice, even the environment. We can see on social media, we have a whole generation and a society of those that advocate climate change. So the role of youth in fostering peace and justice, it comes with advocacy and awareness. Young people are powerful advocates, as I champion as well. They raise awareness about issues like inequality, corruption, systemic injustice. They use the social media to get their voices across. It's good for conflict resolution and mediation. Youth often act as mediators, believe it or not. The perspective that they grew up in, let's look at the different generation, Gen Zs, the millennials, right? I see Gen Zs treating issues that we would have had as next to nothing now because of the age, the era, the time that they live in. They can treat something differently. So that's actually a good thing. It's not like they don't give it the regard or the respect or the appreciation. Is that they have different things to value towards them. So they would treat it differently. So and then it comes down to young leadership and youthful innovation. So through initiatives like, if I should throw in JAP here, you know, different nationwide youth clubs, it can help these young persons with the entrepreneurial ventures, developing their initiatives, their innovative approaches to addressing societal changes and building stronger institutions overall. So, how can youth be better engaged? I think, again, it comes down to empowerment through education. Provide education on, the different elements of the SDGs, the human rights, conflict resolution, civic responsibilities, equip young people with knowledge and tools to become advocates as they may for peace and justice. Integrate peace education into school curricula to the nature and to culture of a non-violence and inclusivity from, how should I say it, from a young age. So crime is of importance to young people as well. And one of the main things that statistics is showing us now is that there's a brain drain in the fact that crime is affecting and impacting young persons to the point at where they are looking for degrees for schools, universities, a way to go out there and study rather than studying locally at home. And even if they do study here, they're seeking the employment opportunities abroad because one, maybe the opportunities are not readily available as we all are challenged. And secondly, if crime is of a problem, then you don't want to live in a crime society. And the third thing, if youths themselves can't get involved because they have a voice and they want to be advocate, then they're limited. So when a young person is limited or have been challenged or impacted because they felt like they've been pressured by the leaders around them, and I say leaders because not only governments, but I'm meaning like in the sphere of advocacy, when they feel like because they're a youth, their voice can't be heard, you tend to migrate. You migrate not just geographically, but you migrate away from that which your passion lies. So I think, that is an aspect psychologically that we also need to look at in terms of youths. Youths with the passion who have identified that and who have let us know their voices, we need to make sure we provide the avenues for them because you don't want them to have that passion and we are the ones, we leaders are the ones that are responsible for burning their candles out because we didn't give them the platform to rise or the platform to develop. So I think that, for youths, it's definitely whether we need to go out there and keep providing and incorporating and involving them, provide the funding, the resources to the youth organizations, leverage the technologies, and most of all, let them feel valued, let their voices be heard. Come back again to my statement, a 21-year-old, 22-year-old as a diplomat in a government. We need to have these young youth initiatives, these youth parallels, to, just like how you'd have the youth parliament. We need to have these and there was once a time when I would have advocated for or tried to say that under each ministry, we should also look at where we have that mentorship program for the ministry line so that the similar way we have the OJT program, we could have a mentorship program in each of the ministries so that we better align education, which is the studies, together parallel coupled with their advocacy so the young people could really how should I say it, have their identify their passions and have it blossomed to be able to make a greater impact. So I just like you could ask me this question about youth and I'm so how should I say passionate about youth development. I could go on and touch on different points, but I think it comes down to the saying, by investing in youth, we need to realize that we need to regard them as agents of change. And by doing so, society can harness their potential to foster a culture of peace and again go back into the theme, justice and strong institutions that we can ensure sustainable development for generations to come.
Yes, Jesse. And I can certainly relate to you in terms of no longer being the youngest in the room.
Yeah.
But I am truly inspired by the many young, brilliant minds that I encounter in my work in climate advocacy and public education, the youth that are actively driving innovative solutions and advocacy. I endorse what you said in terms of the need and the importance of opportunities for meaningful participation and also mentorship to help guide and to develop the potential and the capacity within our youth. And you also made a very interesting point about migration, not only geographically, but migrating away from their passion. And I think that is something that we often overlook we all encounter youth who are passionate, who are educated, who are competent, and they're committed, but then they may find themselves hitting a brick wall over and over. And at some point, as you said, they may just choose to, gravitate to something else. Life takes them in a different direction. And, we lose out on that potential that could have brought a significant solution, that could have solved a challenge, that could have moved the country and the region further along the path of sustainability and resilience.
Correct. And I share that not just from the perspective of being a leader and seeing it, but also I'm admitting it, having felt the same way at one or two other points in my career of advocacy. So I know very well that if I'm experiencing it, what about the others who don't have the opportunities as myself or you may have that we would have had to fight for to get where we are? And because they're challenged, they no longer want to be inspired or no longer feel the need or the zeal to go forward. So that's something that, us as younger persons who would have had that similar experience and now in our mid levels climbing, we need to provide the safe space for the younger ones to be able to evolve and develop and grow.
Certainly, it's a very real issue. So, coming back to the SDGs, each country has an overall score which measures their total progress toward achieving the 17 SDGs. A brief review of country profiles shows that several Caribbean countries are in the red for Goal 16, which means that major challenges remain. So, in your experience, how well is the Caribbean region doing regarding achieving SDG 16? And what are some of the challenges that the region faces? Also, what are your recommendations for how we can make progress?
Okay, that's a great question. And it's one that covers a few different elements or aspects to touch on. So I think that if I dissect the question and take it from the perspective of, who's contributed firstly, I'd say that again, the young persons are really the ones wanting to do more for the Caribbean region. So on that note, you have quite a lot of persons getting involved now more than the last 10 years ago. So, but how much can we do? How much can we progress is also limited by our policies or strategies. And when I say our, I mean that regionally or in our governments. So it comes down to, that accord then how much are we willing to go and give and advocate? So the Caribbean region faces several unique challenges in implementing SDG 16 overall, peace, justice, and strong institutions, due to a combination of how we should see if we look at it in this lens of a historical, socio-economic, and governance factors, like I was, implying too. So right off the bat, this includes high levels of crime and violence. I mean, look at the unfortunate statistic in Trinidad right now, right? High levels of crime and violence, organized crime, gang activity, gang violence. It undermines social stability and it erodes the trust built already in institutions. That couples and comes with weak governance and maybe even corruption. Corruption and inefficiencies in public administrations hinder the effective delivery of justice and public services, leading to, again, inequalities and social discontent. What about economic vulnerabilities? The region's dependency on either what tourism and external markets. So we have tourism, not just speaking about Tobago, talking regionally, and we also have the economy of whether it be oil and gas, manufacturing, whatever it may be. But you have the vulnerabilities across the economy, makes it economically fragile, which in turn exacerbates inequalities and limits investments in the said institutional strengthening. So we're challenged and we're marginalized in some sense. But let's go on. What else can I share? A limited access to justice. Hmm. This is a tricky one. So, what do I really mean when I say that? I'm really referring to the marginalized communities itself, which face the barriers to accessing the legal systems, possibly on the level of the high cost or maybe the long delays we often hear of being or these court cases and so on. It take long to get your justice. And basically the systemic biases that involve comes down to environment and climate risk. We look at natural disasters and climate change, and we talk about how that exacerbates social vulnerabilities and it places additional strain on the already fragile institutions. So this point leads me to, president of Barbados. So in terms of all that is being done and the advocacy for disasters and climate change, and not just mitigate, but the adaptation of it. So my recommendations for progress would be, looking at the elements of strengthening governance and accountability. Obviously, we want to be able to live in a society that has less crime. I wouldn't say crime free, but I would say aim for less crime. So enforce anti-corruption measures and improve transparency in public administration. Start simple, but from the top. Build capacity in law enforcement and judicial systems, enhancing what the efficiency and fairness. Invest in crime prevention and social cohesion, maybe. Implement community-based programs. There are a lot of community-based programs, even held by the TTPS, the different youth clubs and so on. But specifically to address the root causes of the violence, such as poverty, lack of opportunity, different aspects such as household income. But one thing we've always been taught is knowledge is power. So promote education and that training to empower at risk youths. But we also want to see family planning back into the picture because, and I say this without trying to touch a nerve or anything like that, but I say this to highlight the fact children are having children, but we're not incorporating or implementing that parental discipline amongst the generations anymore. So responsibility has been lost. And if it's minused from the picture, then we're fostering communities that are going to be lacking that discipline that we were once taught and handed down from generations to generations. So, if that continues, which is something that can't really be curbed, what we can do as the elders in society, and I'm saying we, but really referring to the professionals and those in authority, is find ways, initiate programs to curb that such that we try to develop their skills, their mindset, their abilities. So it comes back down to education, and we can how should I say, we can go on this topic, and I'll tell you about that just now because we can touch on different levels when it comes to education in our education system. But coming back to, we want to have enhanced access to justice. You look at how you provide justice, how it's been done in the country, what can we do to, increase and improve efficiency, modernizing the systems. uh, I think we could foster regional cooperation, strengthening cooperation among Caribbean nations. We have, the different levels of who's advocating what for what level. We look at Guyana and Barbados, how much they are advancing. We can harmonize that effect and make it a regional task, share best practices and regional resources, sorry, um, for institutional capacity building. And on that last note, I'll say integrate climate resilience overall into governance. That means like building the institutions that are resilient to environmental shocks and can respond effectively to climate change related challenges. Essentially, let's be prepared, but be prepared strategically such that we're not surprised when something hits us, climate change oriented, but we've put things in place to mitigate, to adapt, to be able to deal with. And we can't have a voice globally, but also be able to advocate for that global climate financing to support the region's adaptation and recovery efforts. I think that's a big point, but ultimately, achieving the SDG 16 in the Caribbean requires a multifaceted approach. And I believe that it combines, firstly, good governance, community engagement, regional cooperation, and the climate resilience that we all can have. So, really and truly with a unified commitment to those strategies listed, I think that the region can build a foundation of peace and justice that would in fact support sustainable development for all. There might be some loose ends that we can tie up along the way. There are going to be challenges, but who said there wouldn't be? But we have to try and we have to work hand in hand, find a collaboration, and each nation build that as a region. Because if we try to do it all at once for ourselves, meaning island independent of each other, you're gonna have limited resources and challenges. But if we tackle it as an entire region, I think that we can rely on each other's strength and resources to be able to tackle it together. And in doing so, we can really achieve the SDGs, but not just achieve it for, say, checking a box out, but being able to ensure that we put things in place so that we are adapting well with climate change.
Jesse, what would you say to the listener who is still unsure about their role in peacemaking and wondering how they might get involved?
Okay, so I would say peace building starts with you. Starts with you and I. It's about recognizing the power of our actions, no matter how small you are, to create ripples in of change in your community and beyond. Peace starts with you, and some practical steps can just be, learn about the root causes and conflicts of the challenge faced by the marginalized communities that we've mentioned in this conversation. Understanding the issues is the first step toward meaningful action. Look around in your community, start local. Are there groups or initiatives working on the social cohesion, youth empowerment, environmental justice? I was telling someone up to this week on a personal talk, volunteer your time, lend your voice to efforts, find your passion, find yourself amongst the challenges that exist here. Advocate for change. Use your platforms, whether it's social media, your workplace, your school, to raise awareness about peace and justice issues. So there's a tricky thing in terms of raising awareness. People think that it's you um how should I say it? Going out there with a placard and protesting. No, no, no. Raising awareness isn't protesting. Raising awareness comes in different forms, but it allows you to share your opinion, your voice on facts, on issues, on challenges that you have identified that impacts you, that also impact other persons. So I think young people could jump on that and go ahead and share that as well. Support youth-led organizations, and a big one would be lead by example. So whether you're a young person, you're a young professional, you are a seasoned professional, peace begins with how we treat others in our daily lives. Practice kindness, the simplest thing we've learned. Empathy and active listening. Challenge discrimination when we see it, or inequality when we know that that happens. And engage globally. Participate in global initiatives. So, for example, you've said I wear many hats, like our organization, Global Peace Chain, a UN program, or human rights, as a matter of fact, that I also lead the organization in Trinidad for, which is one of many organizations that already exist. But get involved, express an interest, and become part of the conversation, become part of the initiative. Remember that peace building is not just about ending a conflict. It's actually about creating systems and societies that are fair, that are inclusive, and are sustainable. So I would say no action is too small. Together, when we do it, our collective efforts can create a more just and peaceful world for all. Again, it will have the crimes, it will have the war, it will have all the different elements. But if we don't, and if we stop at nothing, then we would make sure we make our contribution and make our voices be heard, and we'll be doing it collectively and moving the boundary for where that peace can be and how we can harmonize.
Understanding the issue is the first step toward meaningful action. No action is too small. Practice kindness. Peacemaking starts with you. Very important takeaways from today's conversation. Jesse, I want to thank you so much for joining me today to demystify global peace and for helping us to better understand Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. How can listeners stay connected with you?
So firstly, I would share the institutions, the organization websites, which would be globalpeacechain.org or usidhr.org. Those are the two websites that you can find. Or follow me directly on either LinkedIn, my full name, Jesse Ramcharan, or on my personal social media pages, Instagram or Facebook. Get in touch with me. I'm always posting stories or clips or videos or links where you can follow our organizations in the local chapters and how you can be a part of it, whether it's in the Junior Ambassador Apprenticeship Program or any one of our other initiatives that we are seeking to do. And so we're looking forward to a year ahead of different initiatives, events, conferences, different things in which you can get involved in and a part of. So yeah, feel free to check with me and let's see how we can work together towards building that peace and achieving the SDGs.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you very much, Deval.
If you found this episode insightful, we'd love for you to share it with your network, leave us a review, or let us know your thoughts on our social media platforms. And don't forget to subscribe to the Climate Conscious podcast so you won't miss another episode of the Demystify series.